happened to me yesterday. So I apologize well in advance if you expected to see me. I'm very, very sorry. But I hope everyone can hear me. I also want to say thank you so much for having me tonight. I am going to talk a lot about inclusive higher education, but I will probably also talk a lot about our program at UNT, the UNT ElBar Program. However, I invite you to ask me any questions along the way, whether it's specific to our program or specific to higher education in general. I should just say a little bit about me. I was previously a faculty member at the University of North Texas in the Department of Rehabilitation and Health Services. I have a background in rehabilitation counseling. I have previously been a rehabilitation counselor for the state of Texas, as well as I've taught students who become rehabilitation counselors. Now I'm the program director for the UNT ElBar Program, which is a post-secondary program for students with intellectual disabilities. And I myself have a disability. So I feel like I know a lot about disability, higher education, and inclusion. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad, even as the presentation is going, you can certainly ask in the chat. Victoria or Joaquin, if you can let me know if you see anything in the chat or if you want to unmute yourself. I like for it to be very interactive. If folks do have questions, I really want to try and address them for you. I am at home, like many of you, and I do have a 4-year-old who is supposed to be playing his tablet, but he could come in here at any moment and start asking questions. So full disclosure on all of that. Anything else you guys want me to share before I get started?
Real quick, just because I saw this pop up in the chat, Cecilia, you said that it's very hard to hear. Is anyone else experiencing that as well? I am fine and I can hear everything perfectly clear. Victoria, can you hear everything fine?
Yes, I'm able to hear everything.
Okay. Cecilia, maybe perhaps some settings on your end. The other people that are responding can also hear things. Okay.
And sometimes, so you might want to turn your camera. I don't know if you have your camera on. Sometimes it slows my Zoom down, which apparently just doesn't want to work at all. But if you turn your camera off, sometimes that's helpful. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's true. And again, we'll provide this recording, so that you should be able to hear that whenever you get the link to that. But by all means, Dr. Levinson, you can begin whenever you'd like.
And I do believe you have my presentation as well, correct?
I don't think I got the updated version, but if you can send that over tomorrow, I'll include it.
Okay. Awesome, no problem. I will be sure to do that and make sure that you have that as well. So tonight I'm going to talk to you a little bit about inclusion and higher education. And as I mentioned, the presentation will center around a lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis in terms of the ElBar program. But you can certainly ask me any questions and I'll do my best to try and answer as best I can, whether it's related to our program at UNT or related to my experiences. I previously worked as a rehab counselor for students in college. I explicitly worked with students who are blind or visually impaired. However, many of my students had other secondary disabilities. So please ask me any questions. And so I'll tell you about our program. We are what's called a TIPSIT program. And so we're an inclusive post-secondary education program. And there are several hundred programs like us across the United States. And specific to the ElBar program, our goal is to have our students, the vision is for them to get a job. Much of what we do in higher education, whether it's for students with and without disabilities, the goal certainly is academics and learning. But when you graduate from college, your goal is to get a job, whether it's a higher paying job, a better job, or something you're really interested in. So when we're thinking about higher education, it should be, what's the goal after college? So even if you're thinking about a young person with a disability, we certainly, want to, think about post-high school, post outcomes. Is a student going to go to work? And given that our program is a post-secondary program, our goal is, yes, academics and have students take classes, but the overall goal is once they graduate from college, that the student would have a job, they would be in competitive employment. You know, competitive employment being a job where you make at least minimum wage and that a student works with, or a person works with other people who do and do not have disabilities. That doesn't mean you have to work full-time, but that means that you're in a competitive setting where you're working with people with and without disabilities, and you're making at least a minimum wage. We also, as part of our program, really want students to become self-determined. I'm not sure if everyone on here is the parent of a young child or a child in high school or a young adult, or if there are any young adults who are also on here, but we want people to become self-determined. That means that we want people to, you know, be able to start problem solving and making decisions for themselves so that they can be, you know, a participant in society. We also want to think about one of our big things in our program, and for young adults in general, when we think about independence, is this notion of being healthy. So we'll talk about this further on in the presentation, but the notion of both physical and emotional health is something that I think is very important, that when we start thinking about inclusive higher education, that we look at both components. So, you know, people probably like, well, what the heck is inclusion? You know, because again, we're used to this notion of inclusion in secondary education, whether it's elementary, middle, or high school, where we may have students who are in special education, but maybe they have inclusion classes where they may go to particular classes with other students with and without disabilities. So maybe you're in special education for your math, but you go to an inclusion class for PE or music or social studies. When we think about inclusion in higher education, now we're talking about students, you know, with disabilities attending higher education with students without disabilities while getting those individualized supports that they need to, you know, to be successful. And so what, you know, what is that? You know, maybe a student is in higher education and they're getting extra time. Maybe they have a note taker to help them get notes. Maybe instead of writing a paper on a subject, a student does a PowerPoint. That could look so different, you know, for each student. And this is something that I know I do on a day-to-day basis, where I work with students, I work with faculty, I work with employers on campus, and I work with groups, you know, social groups. But making sure that we have those support systems put in place. And each person's support system can look different. You know, as I mentioned, it could be having a peer ally who's a support, you know, who meets you for lunch, who helps you figure out where your classes are. Somebody that, you know, you might go to Walmart with or to Kroger to get groceries. You know, it doesn't necessarily just have to pertain to class. It's all those supports that someone may need to participate in higher education. Am I good so far? Any questions as we go along?
Yeah, you're good. There's no questions.
So, you know, when we were thinking about starting our program specifically at UNT, we wanted to look at, you know, what is the impact of, you know, of inclusive higher ed? Because this, you know, we don't necessarily, society, I should say, and I shouldn't say we, society doesn't always think of people with disabilities, whether they're intellectual, physical, cognitive, psychiatric disabilities. We're not thinking of those types of folks going into college or university. Most of us may picture, when we think about people going to college, we might picture folks who don't have disabilities. But we know that the impact is so great, not only for our students with disabilities, but for students without disabilities, in terms of them being exposed to other people who might be different than themselves. So when we think about students with intellectual disabilities specifically, and who do attend higher education and who are in inclusive higher education, 72% of them are employed. And that's a big deal. And that's after 2 years, because for folks who have intellectual disabilities specifically, the unemployment rate is very high. I know this, I'm also, as I mentioned, a person with a disability. I have a visual impairment. The unemployment rate for people with visual impairments is very high. But we know when we get, further academics, when we get more work experience, and when we get more independence, then we are more likely to get jobs. 91% of folks who go to higher education are also satisfied with their social life. So we like to think of college as, we go to class, you go home. Or you go to class, you go back to your dorm room. But there's so much more to college than just classroom, home. There is that social aspect of, eating lunch together, of going to, social events on campus. I know at UNT, we have a lot of events on campus, some during the day where students can meet up with organizations and have conversations with groups. We have things that, where students may meet up for lunch. Then we have things in the evening, sporting events on campus, there are organization groups. As a matter of fact, several of our students are in a variety of groups on campus, and we have over 400 organizations on campus, and all of our students have to join at least one. So we have some students who are in the Disney Club, and again, it's a club of people who like animation, who like Disney movies, and they get together and they have conversations, they watch movies, they play Disney games. We have another set of students who go to the writing club, where people who want to write screenplays or who want to, write shows, anything, and they get together and they chit chat about being creative and writing. I have another student who goes to garden club, where there's a community garden on campus, and he goes and he helps out and they work on the garden that the students plant, and they actually use the food that they grow as part of the UNT food pantry. He wants to go into a career as a gardener and as a farmer, and so he really enjoys that. I have another student that's in the esports club. He likes esports. He likes to play those, like Madden, NBA games. And so he's in that, and this group gets together, they play games, they chit chat. So there's a lot of social things that go on outside of what we think of like fraternity parties or whatever. Students can join clubs, they can meet for lunch, they can go to musicals and plays, they can go to events that are on campus. If we think about college campuses, some of them are just a smaller version of society. So students get exposed to these events, and that helps them to build up their social skills. 53% of students who are in inclusive higher education programs are in paid employment. I know as a part of our program, all of our students also have to get a job on campus, at least at the beginning. Some are in paid employment settings, some are in unpaid employment. But I can tell you as a rehab counselor, the only way to get a job is to get a job. So that means that if you get experience working, whether you're getting paid for doing that work, or you are doing what's called an internship where you may not be getting paid, that still helps you to get another job, because that way you can build up your resume. Potential employers can see, oh, you are able to greet customers. Oh, you know how to file. You know how to answer a phone. You know how to work with other people on a team. That helps you to get a job. So thinking about that when we're in higher education, it's also important to get those career experiences. Other benefits of inclusive higher education is self-determination. We talked about that, kind of a student's ability to solve problems on their own and to figure out, okay, I need to get to class on time. How do I get up in the morning? Oh, okay, I only have one pair of pants left. Maybe I should do my laundry. Oh, okay, I was supposed to meet someone for lunch. They didn't show up. Oh, okay, I have this assignment due. What am I going to do? That self-determination and helping you to problem solve and helping you to do time management is real important. Also thinking about financial gain. Typically, when we go to college, we're able to get higher paying jobs when we graduate. It's the same thing for people with intellectual disabilities who also go to higher education. The social interaction piece that we talked a lot about, that you get to meet different people from different walks of life, and you get to have those social interactions. And so if you're someone who likes to be around a lot of people, then you can do activities where you may be around a lot of people. If you're someone who likes small groups and quiet settings, then you can look at activities where it is a small group setting as well. And then community integration. We talked about a university being just a smaller version of a society. So you get to have that community integration where you become a part of the community. And I will tell you, our students have only been on campus since August, and I meet people all the time that say, oh, I know the Elvar Program, I know the students, or I have the students in my class, or I met this student at the organization, or at the basketball game, so it's becoming a part of the community as well. Also, this notion of structure. It's helping students, think about structure and, what is needed to, get up in the morning, to go to class, to go to work, but also to think about when do I need to do my independent living skills and, laundry, organization, etc. Building up that structure is very important. And then the independence, most of our students, when they first come to us, they're either just graduating from high school or they've been at home after high school for a couple of years with mom and dad or other family members. But once they come to campus, then they learn how to become independent. I meet a lot of parents who want their children to come to our program specifically, and independence is always the thing they talk about. I just want them to be confident. I feel like they can do it, but I want them to be independent. I want them to learn how to do things on their own. And that is what, higher education can also assist with. Let me know if we're going along, if we have any questions, feel free to stop me. So when we think about, okay, here's, why would a student want to go again into an inclusive setting? If we look at, I mentioned there's so many programs across the country that do provide inclusive higher education. The things that we've learned is that more than 80% of all jobs out there are going to require some type of post-secondary education. That's a lot when we think about how many different types of jobs out there, that to know that, oh my gosh, over 80% are going to require some type of post-secondary education. So that would tell me, okay, then I should look into maybe getting some post-secondary education. Whether it is that you go fully, through a program and you get a certificate, or maybe you do a summer program at a college or a university, getting some of that post-secondary education is very important, to getting those jobs. When we think about Texas specifically, some of the statistics we've seen, say that less than 25% of people with intellectual disabilities are employed in Texas. That goes back to what I talked about earlier with the employment rate being lower for people with intellectual disabilities. And they're saying, only 5% are in inclusive settings. I will say that number has gone up some, but it is not as high as one would think. When we think about people with intellectual disabilities being employed, a lot of what we see is still what we call those sheltered employment settings, where it's people with intellectual disabilities working with other people who either have intellectual disabilities or other disabilities. But the goal of inclusive higher education is to get folks with disabilities out there working with other folks who do not have disabilities. Before I move into person-centered planning, does anybody have any questions? Is that a no one, King or Victoria?
Yeah, there's none in the chat currently.
Okay. You guys are a quiet group. I hope I'm not boring you to tears. or to sleep, but I know it's after 6 and people are probably at home, doing their nightly duties. And so this is something I think is important wherever you go, or whatever you decide for yourself or for your loved one in terms of post-secondary education or work, is to think about making sure that you have a person-centered plan. It is something that we use with our program, but something that I think is valuable with whatever you decide. And this is something you could even do as a parent or a family member or as a young person There are many resources out there that will teach you to do a person-centered plan. And you're probably like, what the heck is a person-centered plan? A person-centered plan is where we actually look at the person themselves and what they need. So they, it's just as it states, is the person is the center of what's going to happen. So if I'm doing a person-centered plan for Victoria, I'm going to talk to her specifically about her life, her needs, her wants, her support system. Her plan will look different than Joaquin's plan because I'll talk to him about his life, his needs, his goals. And so it really is individually based, and it really does look at what the person is interested in. So when we talk about holistic needs and supports, that's everything from what do you need to be independent? Are there any independent living skills you need? Or are there any financial skills, literary skills maybe you need? Or are there any academic skills that you need? Work experience? We look at anything that's a part of your whole person and make sure that we are starting to address those needs. We also look at what supports you have. Do you have family supports? Do you have friend supports? Do you have educational supports you still work with? Are there any medical, supports? So maybe there's a therapist that you're working, whether it's mental health therapist or a speech therapist or an occupational therapist. Do you have a particular doctor you like? We look at all those different needs, but then we look at what supports you already have in place. And then something I think that's real important when we're talking about person-centered planning is your interests and your dislikes. So what might be some things that you're interested in? Are you interested in animation? Are you interested in sports? Are you interested in the healthcare field? Are you interested in working with children? All of those different pieces, those are things you're interested in. And at the same time, we go back and we say, well, what are things that you don't like? Because sometimes, as a young person, we may think we like one thing, but we're not certain. But there are definitely things out there we know we don't like. So maybe your dislikes, maybe you don't like math, maybe you don't like English, maybe you are not interested in sports, you don't like sports, maybe you don't like working with other people, maybe you don't like history. You think about all these different things that you don't like. So that way we can talk about things you like, things you might be interested in versus the things you don't like. So if we know you don't like something, then that's something that we should not include when we're working on your plan. Another important piece is going to be to think about your short-term and long-term goals. So, what is it that we can, you might have this long-term goal of maybe you want to be a daycare assistant. So maybe you want to work at a daycare and be an assistant. Okay, that's your long-term goal. So in the short term, what do you want to do? Maybe you want to take classes in childhood development. Maybe you want to go and work at a daycare for 10 hours a week. Maybe you want to start babysitting. Maybe you want to learn how to do your own laundry and learn how to clean your room. These are all short-term goals that are going to lead you to your big long-term goal of working at a daycare and being a daycare assistant. Maybe you want to be a sports manager. Okay, that's great. That's your long-term goal. Then short-term, maybe you want to take classes in sports management. Maybe you want to get a job working with the sports team. Again, maybe you want to learn how to handle your money, so financial literacy. All short-term goals that are going to get you to that long-term goal of becoming a sports manager. And then again, making sure that those are individually based. We talked about them being holistic, looking at all these areas of your life, but making sure they're individual to you. Just what I talked about earlier. So if we are doing a plan for Joaquin, and it's going to look different than the plan for Victoria. I can have two students, and I actually do have two students who have very similar long-term goals, but their person-centered plans look very differently because they need assistance and supports that are different from each other. One may need supports with, financial literacy, excuse me, whereas one may need supports learning how to do laundry and cleaning. One has experience working, in the sports area. The other one does not. Sorry, I might drink me a little water. I apologize. So each individual, though they may have similar long-term goals, may have different individual needs and supports, and we need to think about those as we prepare. Okay, sorry, I like to ask before each slide in case we have any questions.
Yeah, there's one in the chat. It says, does the ElBar program at UNT allow the student to get a bachelor's degree?
That was a fabulous question. And so I'll tell you, I didn't even talk about that. But when we think about our program, we offer a certificate. So students come in and they take classes, pass or fail for 0 credit. And they also take ElBar specific classes that I'll kind of talk about. This is a perfect segue because I'm talking about academics right now. So they'll take traditional UNC classes and they take anything that they, are interested in the catalog within limits, obviously, but something that if they're interested in musical theater, then we'll look at, theater classes, and they take those for no credit. But it's pass or fail. So they have to pass the class. It's not like, oh, you just get the certificate. You have to pass the class. And then the students are also expected to take program specific courses. So we teach very specific courses, and those are actually open to students, all students on campus, not just our ElBar students. And we have things on financial literacy, nutrition and sexual education, career exploration, advocacy. And the students also have to take those classes, as well as get jobs, as I mentioned, whether they're paid or unpaid, and they all have to join an organization. And that all goes into their certificate. So it's a 4-year program. And once they finish, they get the certificate of completion. And that goes along with them to the employer to show, here's the experiences that the student has had over the past 4 years. Each student takes 2 classes a semester. But at the beginning, the students are only working about 5 to 10 hours. But once we get into years 3 and 4, the students are working 20 to 30 hours and living off campus at that point. They're trying to really get integrated into the community. Great question. But we do not offer a bachelor's degree. There are some other programs out there that may offer bachelor's degrees. Ours is not one of them. We do, though, also on our campus have what's called UNT Engage. And that is a program for students who are neurodiverse. And it supports traditional UNT students who are neurodiverse who do want to get a bachelor's degree, but it is not what I would call an inclusive program for students with intellectual disabilities. It's a little bit different than our program. Great question. When we think about also, when I talked about, that post-secondary experience and making sure that students have that, yes, academic classes, certainly that. And as I talked about, you don't have to take those in a traditional sense. You can take them as a pass fail. Some programs have students audit a class. Some students do have students take them for credit. Some programs have very specific classes that the students are allowed to take at the university. It all depends kind of on the program and how it's designed. We are fortunate that our students can take anything as long as it's related to their person-centered plan and their career goals. But other programs are going to be a little more specific. Other things that we like for our students to participate in is campus workshops and trainings. So our students do trainings with, money management. Our students do trainings with the health center on nutrition. Our students do trainings with the health center on sexual education. We teach our own sexual education class, but then we also bring those resources in to provide trainings. Our students have done trainings with the Pride Alliance Center on the LGBTQI+ community. So we try to use campus resources as well to get our students engaged. They go to the library and take trainings. We try to make it as inclusive and as supportive as possible, so that we are relying on campus resources, but then we're also, doing our own specific classes. Like I mentioned, whether the financial literacy, they take that through a campus resource, but then we also teach an entire class on that through our program. The same thing with the nutrition and sexual education. We get those resources to come in and provide workshops, but we also teach a class on that as well. Great question. And I will say, sometimes we do get students who come in and sit in on our workshops or on our classes who are not in the ElBar program, but want to come over and learn about nutrition and learn about sexual education as well. Any other questions, Joaquin, before I move on?
No, that
Okay.
was the one.
Thank you. I'll pause before each slide just in case. So when we talk about competitive employment and when we think about higher education, the goal is to increase a student's ability to get a job when they graduate, to be competitively employed. And as we remember, that is a job where a person makes at least minimum wage and works with people with and without disabilities. Specific to our program, we try to focus the employment piece on the person-centered plan. So I can tell you with our guys right now, if the young man that's interested in sports is actually a manager on one of the sports teams on campus, we have another student who's interested in dance and theater. He is a manager as well with one of our, not with one, he's a manager of the cheerleading team. We have a student that's also interested in sports. He works at the rec center. We have another student that likes cooking. He works at a restaurant. And we have another student that wants to go into animation and production. He worked at the media library, and now he's currently working at the Welcome Center. And so you're probably like, why the Welcome Center? Because he's getting skills where he's interacting with other people, he's communicating, he's looking at products that UNT produces to introduce people to campus. So he's still getting those same skills that he would need to go and become a part of a production team. He's learning how to do teamwork. He's learning about what it takes to produce papers and brochures, all those things. So when we think about, employment, we of course make sure that it's related to the person-centered plan, but also that it provides the skills a person is going to need when they want to go and get a job. We also have some of our students are in paid experiences and some are in unpaid experiences. But again, I will say that the rule of thumb with rehab counseling, you certainly want paid employment, but unpaid employment can also lead to paid employment. So the important thing is to get the work experience. Our program provides a job coach. And so the job coach actually is a part of the whole process with our students. They help them apply for jobs. They help them write their resumes. They help them practice their interviewing, and they go on the interview with the student. And once the student gets the job, they go with them the first few weeks to make sure that they understand what they're doing, that they are feeling comfortable and confident. And I have to say, in most of our job settings, our job coach has gone maybe 1 or 2 weeks, and then they're asked to leave because the student has it and they want to use the natural supports there. We have had some great experiences on campus where I'm always like, the job coach is going to go, they're going to help. And literally they'll go with the student 2 or 3 times. And then the supervisor's like, we don't need you anymore. Another student is helping them or another coworker is helping them. So we've had some great experiences on campus, which is another way, for students to be in a safe environment, something that's welcoming, something that's nearby. Their job coach, if they need help, we're right there on campus. We can run over to the job site. The employer can call us or send us a quick note if they need any help. But a lot of our students, our job coaches go maybe, the first couple of weeks and they fade away. And then the student is using the natural supports. Many of our students, when they meet people, at their jobs, they start going to lunch with them, which is what you want. Anybody who's, in a job, setting, a lot of times you also go to eat lunch with your coworkers. So they go to eat lunch with their coworkers. Sometimes they'll meet up after work or outside of work to do activities on campus. It has been a great way to build up not just, work experience, but also to build up those good social support networks as well for our students. We also do a great job when we are looking for those employment opportunities to work with potential sites on campus. And I go in and I talk to them a lot about our program, what it may be like to have someone with an intellectual disability work on campus or work there. We provide resources for them. The students, though, have done a great job of telling them, things they need help with and things they don't need help with as well. But we spend a lot of time, talking to the employers and developing those relationships so that once the student gets there, they can feel fairly comfortable. But I have to say our students have integrated pretty well at their employment sites. Any other questions before I move on to housing and independent living?
None.
Okay. So our students, as a part of the ElBar program, have to live on campus the first 2 years. We feel it's really important for them to get integrated into college, that they need to live on campus so they can build those independent living skills. Not all inclusive programs are like that. Some programs allow students to come and go on, a day-to-day basis. Some programs have specific housing where the students with intellectual disabilities may live. They may be partnered with another student who doesn't have a disability. Some may be like ours. Our students live in the dorm with other UNT students. They share a suite. So it's 2 students. Each student has their own bedroom, and they share a bathroom, but they're both ElBar students. We have one student, though, that is paired with a student, a traditional UNT student, and that's only because we had an odd number this year. But in general, our students live in a regular UNT dorm. They have a general resident assistant RA who lives on the floor, but they live on the floor with other students who don't have disabilities and other students who just traditional UNT students. But each program, I will say, when we think about housing programs for students with intellectual disabilities, look differently. I know of some programs where the students may live in special housing and they're partnered with someone. So it's like a student with an intellectual disability is partnering with someone without an intellectual disability who kind of helps and provides those supports. And that's not our program. Our students are fully included and they're right in the dorm with everybody else. We do provide training to the dorm. We do have meetings frequently with the resident director of the dorm that our students are in. We do hear from the RA if they have any questions, but the students are expected to move in and kind of live just similar to any other UNT student. The housing staff, I have to say, and the RA has been great with working with our students and providing those supports. And when they do have questions, they do reach out to us. This year has been real interesting. It's been our first year. This is literally our second semester. And we've had all those winter storms, the weather, we've had the tornadoes, and the staff has done a great job of making sure our students know where they're going to go if they need to, leave their room for a tornado, what's going to happen during the winter weather, if the dorm is going to close down, how do they get access to the things they need. We've worked really good with the housing staff to make sure that our students are prepared as well. And we also feel that when the students live in the dorm, we have those activities that can promote independent living. Our students, the first semester, every Sunday, they were sending me pictures cooking in the kitchen. They were all cooking together, making meals. They were helping each other learn how to do their laundry. That was a big thing. Some of our students came in and knew how to do their laundry. Other students needed help. So we provided videos, we provided checklists, and now a lot of our students are doing their laundry. Of course, our students may need reminders, but we provide those as well. Our students also, because they live in the dorm, there are lots of activities that they have in the dorm, where there are things that are related to a holiday. So they have Valentine's activities, they have Halloween activities, they have midterm snacks, final exams, all that. Our students also, if they feel like it, they go and they participate. They play pool together. They have movie nights with other students. So they really get to engage with other students in the dorm who may or may not have disabilities as well. Any other questions before I move into my next one?
No, there's none.
So we are very big on social interaction, and we actually have an organization that our students in the ElBar program have helped to form with other UNT students, and it's called the Peer Ally Program. And at the beginning of the program, our students are matched with a peer ally, and it's the same age person who does not have an intellectual disability, who's a UNT student. And this person can help them, learn campus. They can go get lunch together. It's up to them as to how involved they want to be with their peer allies. Some of our students go to football games together. They meet to play soccer. The peer allies will take them. I will say when the winter weather occurred, several of our peer allies said, oh, well, don't worry about it. They helped our students go to Walmart and Kroger and get snacks and food for the dorms since they couldn't get out. They're getting ready to go to a Stars game soon. They are very involved and invested, to help each other out. And now they go out, our students go out and recruit other peer allies so they can have this great group that can do all these fun activities together. It's just a good way for you to have, a support system where if a student isn't, as involved in trying to meet new people, we can help match you with someone who has similar interests to you. We also encourage our students, I talked about this earlier, to join other student clubs and organizations, something that they're interested in, the Garden Club, Disney Club, the esports, whatever it is. We sit down with our students and say, what are you interested in? I mean, there's 400 clubs. There's something out there that you got to be interested in. And we encourage that so that the students can also go into a space where they, might feel comfortable or find someone that's similar to them and have similar interests. Some of our peer allies, ironically, when they heard our students wanted to join a club and they were nervous, they went with them. So one of our peer allies was like, I like Disney movies. I'm into, so she went with a couple of our guys to the Disney club. So they had a friend that they already knew, and then she was able to help introduce them to new friends on campus as well. Okay, anything before I move into this one?
No, you're good.
Something that we thought was going to be very important was this notion of health for our students. And in particular, when we think about college students, a lot of college students come to campus and they have what they call the freshman 15, where you gain a lot of weight because you're living in the dorm, you're eating different foods. So we really try to incorporate health into our program, throughout the program. So we spend a lot of time, talking about diet and nutrition. The nutritionist comes in the first semester to talk to the guys about some healthy ways to eat. She even gives them a great way to think about what could you eat when you go in the cafeteria. We talk about the food that's in the cafeteria. We teach our own nutrition class. Our students also get integrated into our recreational center where they can go work out. We do workshops with the rec center too, where the students can go and learn how to exercise, how, to do things that promote health. We will accompany them. So we have a few students who are nervous about going to the rec. So one of our staff will go with them the first few times till they kind of learn the rec and they get a little more comfortable. Some of our peer allies actually will meet the guys over there to exercise, and they do everything. They play basketball, they go swimming, they do, walk around the track. It's kind of up to them. And as I mentioned, one of our students actually works there now. We also, invite them to join an intramural sports club. So we have a student that really likes to play soccer. So him and his peer who also likes to play soccer, they get together a lot of times and they play soccer, but they can also join that club if they're interested as well. We are very big on mental health resources. And so our students actually attend a group. They have a group once a week where they meet, and it's run by a re-up counseling graduate student. And that way they can talk about social skills or things that might be frustrating them that they don't want to necessarily talk about in front of us, and they can get guidance on that. We also encourage all of our students at the beginning of the program to sign up for counseling sessions. We do have a counseling clinic right next door to where our office is, where the students can go and receive counseling services that are free and open to all UNT students as well. We also talk about sexual education, whether it's through workshops with the health center or our own particular class. We use a curriculum called Positive Choices, and it is actually designed to teach sexual education to students with intellectual disabilities. So we use something that is already a resource that's out there and developed, where we're not developing our own resource, that we find is helpful and is written in a language that's, very well understood by our students as well. And again, we also have the health center come in and talk about what resources they have. And we talk about if you're not feeling well, especially during the COVID, we really have talked to the students about if you have symptoms, if we need to go get tested, if we need to go to the health center because you're not feeling well. We have had a great relationship with our health center as well.
You're good.
Okay, look at that, you got it now, no. So this is for anyone when you're thinking about, going out and developing inclusive practices. I highly recommend this. The first thing, so if you have any resources that, and somebody you might know on campus, or you want to go on the internet and look up a particular campus you're interested in, start looking, maybe the Disability Student Services. Go to them first. They can probably tell you about some programs that they have on campus, so that you can start building that information up. It's never too early. People think, oh, my child is only 13. That's okay, get it started, because it takes a longer time than you may think. If you have a young person or you yourself are interested in a particular career, look at what kind of classes you might want to take. So if you're interested in photography, what classes do you need to become a photographer? If you are interested in working in the healthcare industry, maybe you want to work as a healthcare assistant, what classes do you need to take? Start looking at that. And these are some of the things that we did too. We started building relationships with people we knew on campus so that we could start making sure things were inclusive. We also met a lot with student affairs, and the leaders on campus so that we could see, who's going to be interested. You got to get buy-in at the university. Our president, I have to say, has been very supportive of our program, but you got to make sure it's there, especially for people with disabilities. You certainly don't want to be in a space where you are not, welcome. We do a lot of work with our career center as well, because I told you we are very big on employment. We also partner with our career center a lot as well. I also try to look for classes for my students because I'm trying to get them as much experience that may have labs. So I have a student that's really interested in theater. So his theater courses tend to have labs. So he takes a class about costumes. And so he learns about how to make costumes, but then he's in a lab where he's actually making costumes with other students. I have a student that's interested in healthcare. So he's in a biology class, and then he has a biology lab. So the student is getting the lecture, but then they're getting the hands-on experience as well. Always go back to the person-centered plan. I don't want, to work with a student to, bring them to campus and then I'm providing them things that they don't like. I want to make sure that I'm meeting their needs and I'm making sure that we're getting them the supports that they need. This is information about our program specifically that you could learn about us. Oh, and I don't know what happened. I had another slide on resources, but I'm going to talk to you about those specifically because I did have another slide with resources and I don't know what happened to that slide literally. But there are some great resources out there, and I'll make sure, Joaquin, before I send you my PowerPoint tomorrow, that I find that slide because I put it specifically. Where Think College, that's THINK, like you're thinking about college, is a great resource to visit, especially if you are thinking about post-secondary education. They, I say, are the go-to on all inclusive programs and higher education for people with disabilities, and that's Think, THINK College. They will talk about the programs across the country. They talk about financial resources. They talk about getting your child prepared for post-secondary education. It's a great space to get lots of information about higher education. The Pacer Center also provides great information on transition and getting young people ready for higher education as well. I highly recommend those two resources. That is all I have, unless you all have any questions.
Yeah, there's one in the chat asking about, is there, can the program that you were talking about, ElBar, can it be paid for by financial aid or through vocational rehabilitation?
Fabulous question. I get it asked all the time. Yes, and somewhat. So we actually, because we are a comprehensive transition program, a student can apply for financial aid and get a Pell Grant. So that's going to be needs-based, and that you can certainly use those funds. We are actually working right now with Texas Workforce Commission to get our program, to qualify to get paid. Different states, these types of programs are funded through VR services. Texas is not currently one of those because we're a newer program. They want more outcomes before they will invest in our program, but we have been working closely with them. And so maybe they won't pay tuition, but maybe they'll help to offset the cost of the dorm or employment services. It's kind of an individual basis to counselors. And so I again say, start talking to your rehab counselors, start advocating for those services. The more parents we have advocating for Texas workforce to invest in this program, the better off it will be. We also are doing a lot of fundraising and trying to get scholarship money to offset the cost of the program. Great questions.
Yeah, I think, well, that was the only one on there. I don't think there are any more questions. So I will stop the recording right now.
Well, as I mentioned, if anyone thinks of anything, or Akeem, there's anything else I can help you with, please, please, please